Welcome to the 2021 NFL Draft.
Leopold.
The Jacksonville Jaguars select Trevor Lawrence, quarterback, Clemson.
You are listening to The Review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. It's a new episode of The Review. It's the Online Sports Guys College Football Podcast with featuring us, the Online Sports Guys. Me, OSG Phil, him, OSG Nelson, and joining us today, Jarrett Smith. Jarrett, welcome to the show.
Thank you. What have I signed up for?
A special Law and Order crossover event. That's what this is.
Very special OSG.
Yes, and I already think we're going to have to bring Jarrett back when Wilkie's with us, just so they can talk Arkansas football for 30 minutes.
Arkansas and LSU.
Oh, yeah, that's it's going to be pettiness. Is what it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
We talk the whole West. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, heck of a conversation. Guys, since the last time we did a show, there's been a whole lot going on, including the big one for the world of college and professional football, the NFL draft happening this past weekend.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it, yeah. No publicity at all. No such thing as mocking or drafting or anything like that.
Well, there is mocking of mocking and mocking of drafting, so you're not too far from the truth.
We mock what we don't understand.
Yeah.
But after 9 months of build-up, we finally had the draft. And taking the college football spin on it, the SEC, 65 SEC football players got picked in this year's draft. That is mind-boggling. I want to say it's like, what, a third or a fourth of all the players drafted?
Yeah. I mean, it's an obscene number.
Yeah,
it's a truly obscene number.
As people who try to play ourselves off as journalists, the math's not one of our strong suits, so you'll have to forgive us if we don't have an exact percentage of that.
Yeah, no.
But I guess I want to say, what does it say about the SEC? But we know what it says about the SEC. They turn out pro-ready players. Half the Alabama roster got drafted by various teams throughout the NFL. And we might as well start with the first round, because we saw that run on quarterbacks that we had talked about in the show a couple of weeks ago coming. It happened. 1, 2, 3, Trevor Lawrence,
Wilson.
Zach Wilson, Lance, the first three off the board. Did you guys see the elaborate ruse coming from the 49ers about picking Trey Lawrence that we thought might come?
Trey Lance.
You're
blending Trevor Lawrence and Trey Lance. It would be someone who's like 6'6" and 235 pounds. You're not too far off.
Trevor Lawrence is already 6'5" and about 240.
I know.
Trevor Lawrence is a large human being.
Yes.
And it's even larger.
Yeah. Trey Lance is like tackling a bison.
Literally and figuratively. Thank you.
There were a lot of people who were trying to predict the draft who really thought that the Niners were serious about taking Mac Jones in that number 3 pick, but they never did.
No, they didn't. And it's one of those things. I heard a number of people talk about it before the draft, that Shanahan's system, the way it works, where you can just put somebody in there. I need somebody who can make a throw, and the window's not even going to be necessarily tight. You just got to be able to make a throw. Yeah. And like Mac Jones might kind of fit that. Now instead you get Trey Lance, and does anyone really know what they're getting with Trey Lance at the NFL level? Because it feels like the ceiling doesn't really exist, but the floor is also kind of like
it's up here.
Yeah. And it's like the range here is kind of terrifying to be spending a 3rd round pick on.
Just what he brings to the table in his short time of experience in the FCS level, it's obvious he knows he's got the arm. That's not questioned by anybody. And it looks like he took a lot of snaps under center. He's not the big name college football quarterback who did nothing but take shotgun snaps and run an RPO, because he ran more of a closer to a pro style offense, which is what you're going to get with Shanahan, who likes to run a variation of the RPO, and had success with it, even making Matt Ryan look like an athletic quarterback back in 2016 when Matt had his career year. And to see what he did with that, thinking about the potential with an athlete like Lance, who can throw the ball, who can run the ball, and appears by all reports to be pretty darn smart, the sky's the limit for them.
Question for me, though, is this, and this is a question that I have for both Trevor Lawrence and for Trey Lance. Is it a situation where they get to learn a little bit, and say Gardner Minshew is your quarterback in Jacksonville to start the season, and Trevor gets to learn, and is Garoppolo your quarterback in San Francisco, where Trey Lance gets to learn, and it's a gradual introduction into what you're looking at in the National Football League? Or is it a Troy Aikman situation where you're out there, you're thrown against the Wolves, and you end up with a David Carr impression with the Houston Texans, where the only thing missing was the parabolic microphone picking up David Carr going, "Ah!" as he's running for his life for an entire season?
Jarrett, would you agree that in the case of Trevor Lawrence, Urban Meyer and company is just going to walk out there and say, sink or swim?
Yeah, it feels like it. Everyone I've talked to in the North Atlanta area who experienced what he went through in the Cartersville area over to people in Clemson, it feels like he has kind of been groomed for this moment. He's been handed the reins multiple times, and whether or not he sinks or swims, I can't sit here and predict, but I think he's got the mannerism and the personality to make it work. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to work, but I think he's the kind of disposition that can absolutely make it work and be very successful. With Trey Lance, I do like the idea of him sitting. I wouldn't have minded Trey Lance here, but I'm not going to spend a number 4 overall pick on him. But if Trey Lance hadn't risen like he did, and I get why he did, the raw skills are so obscene, but he's played 11 games in college. I do like the fact that he's talked about learning how to throw from his dad, who was a defensive back, and learning about, throwing a ball that is harder to defend versus throwing a ball that's always easy to catch. And he's one I think you definitely said, but man, if you told me that Trey Lance absolutely lights it up because he gets a year to sit and absorb everything and then comes out and causes some problems, especially before people get tape on him, yeah, buy that for $1.
And then the question for me at number 2 is, I think that Wilson goes out there immediately because of the money that they're going to spend. But once again, the question that I have when it comes to Trevor in Jacksonville and Wilson with the Jets is the offensive line and how much protection these two guys are going to be getting. Are they going to be running for their lives, or are they going to be ending up on their butts most of the year? That, to me, is the bigger concern when it comes to the development of these two, Jarrett, when it comes to how it's going to look for these guys coming out of the blocks. Yeah,
Wilson's an interesting case. Like, he can extend the play. And it does suck for guys like him and Lance. To me, it sucks for them because you have two guys who didn't really get necessarily the high level competition you want to see from your top flight guys. It's not his fault. He plays at BYU. That's where he got a chance to go play. And that's, he's facing the competition he faces. The Coastal Carolina game might be the best one that we have as reference point for him. They did, that game was absolutely just mind-bendingly drunk and wonderful. You were missing out on Trey Lance getting another full season of FCS ball, which does stink for him. You got the one season and then one game where that's okay. Started off slow in that one game in the fall of 2020 and then did fine by the end of the game. But it does stink that they didn't have those games for us to see like what they can handle. Because I think you're right. Zach Wilson, you're going to hand the reins to Zach Wilson because you don't have Darnold anymore. Who are you going to throw out there? If you're the Jets, so you can pull Mark Sanchez out of the abyss.
Ken O'Brien, Richard Todd.
Vinny Testaverde.
Yeah, at the age of 74. You know, Al Woodall. It's
that was the first thing that popped into my mind when the Jets actually announced that pick. Is here we go again with Sam Darnold. They just went through this exact thing where they drafted a top-ranked quarterback in the top couple picks of the draft, and Darnold had nothing. Granted, the Jets did draft this year some players around him.
Yeah.
Elijah Moore was an excellent pick at Ole Miss, and I think he'll do very well for them. But at the same time, who's going to block for him? I mean, the other thing that I find interesting is, Trevor Lawrence is probably the most prepared to be an NFL quarterback to come out of the draft since Andrew Luck. And now he has his teammate Travis Etienne to run in the backfield with him. And I think, if my memory serves, and I have to go back and look at my list of who the Jaguars drafted, but I think they drafted an offensive lineman from Clemson too.
But I think and that's not the only relationship that you get to see with teammates. You get Jamar Chase with Burrow, and I think you also get Jalen Waddle heading to Miami for your Miami Dolphins. So, yes. And I think that's key here as well when you have young quarterbacks with those, for lack of a better phrase, security blankets for those guys that you have those relationships with. And I think that it's interesting that I can't recall, Jared, a draft where we've seen this kind of selective drafting where you have weapons who are familiar with each other finally getting to hook back up on the pros. I can't remember to this depth seeing something like this with the cases that we've been talking about.
I don't know if it's something that was intentional or if it was just kind of a product of everything kind of lined up that way, where you have these wide receivers come out of Alabama in a way that you can spread them around. I still have questions about Jamar Chase to Cincinnati, not necessarily because I don't think Jamar Chase is good. I think Jamar Chase is in the conversation for the best pass catcher coming out of this draft. For me, he is the best, but I'm also an LSU fan.
You're
so
biased.
Kind of biased. Him not playing in 2020, I think, hurt perception of what he did in 2019. He put AJ Terrell in a mixing bowl for 60 minutes at different points in the national championship game. I wonder if some of it's just how it lines up, and you get guys that are comfortable with it. I think I'd have gone offensive line if I was Cincinnati, but if you expect AJ Green to be gone and you need a pass catcher, you have given Joe Burrow the security blanket he had when he was in Baton Rouge. Now he's just going to have to hit it on the run as he's running away for his life. Once again, I'm sure he will have to do it again this year. But there's a couple of them where I'm like, I don't know if that's the move I would have gone with, but not, and it's not a slight against the players, but it was a matter of, I understand why you did it in a sense of comfort, because you want guys to be comfortable and you want them to succeed quickly.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we talked about SEC players at the beginning of the show here too. It's guys who played against each other, guys who are familiar with each other going into the NFL, as opposed to just learning that, oh my God, I'm lining up against 10 guys who I've never seen before, just as big and just as fast as I am. Holy shit, what do I do? And that's kind of the beauty of all this. I was just looking down the Bengals draft roster here as we have this conversation, and they did draft tackle Jackson Carman from Clemson in the second round to give him a little bit of protection. And the Bengals also signed Riley Reif late of Minnesota to free agent contract as well. Not to say that that's going to make them all of a sudden a playoff contender, just saying that they're trying to build a little bit of support around Joe Burrow, who for all practical purposes really is a rookie. He didn't get to play that much last season. He got some taste of the game, but is that enough to really say that he's an experienced veteran at this point?
I mean, you got reps in your first season. So for me, it wasn't a completed year, and I think that when you get a full year as a starter under your belt, then for me, you can sit there and say that there's experience. I think that, it was almost like a glorified an exhibition block where, you're going to play X number of snaps in the exhibition season, then you get more snaps in the regular season before you're injured. So when you get into that rhythm of a full season, I don't think that you're thinking right now of Joe Burrow as a veteran for veteran's sake in the definition of the word, but getting there. I think that a full healthy season would then lend itself to that designation.
And one other move that really stood out to me in terms is while we're talking about quarterbacks, and that's Chicago trading up to grab Justin Fields.
My Chicago Bears select Justin Fields, quarterback, Ohio State.
Say it. Go ahead and say it. Soldier Fields already. That's already being circulated. Soldier Fields.
I didn't even think that.
I mean,
I
I appreciate that you went there, though.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, it's important.
I think that's a great pickup for them. Again, a situation where he walks in and they've got Andy Dalton on the bench. They've got one of the more veteran quarterbacking corps in the league between Andy Dalton and Nick Foles. But it's enough to give Fields a chance to get a feel for the game before he actually has to walk out on the field and perform. I think out of all of the quarterbacks out there, except for maybe Lawrence, I think that's going to be your best rookie quarterback.
See, for me, once again, I go to what's going to surround him. I mean, are they going to try to force him into a system that doesn't go to his skill set, or are they going to construct a system? Because if you sit there and you look at the quarterbacks that are already there, yeah, you get to learn, but those guys aren't as mobile as Justin is. And that's the thing. It's like you're dealing with drop back passers versus someone who can get you a bunch of different ways if you're a very healthy Justin Fields.
Watch his game tape. He didn't really rely on his running skills so much as being more of a drop back pocket type passer who ran when he didn't have any other option.
But for me, I just look at it once again as I worry about that kind of a situation, knowing what his skill set is and taking full advantage of it. That for me, Jared, is the biggest thing for someone that we've all seen since his time at Harrison High School, north of the city.
I think he's got an insane skill set that he can absolutely put to use in Chicago. It's just a matter of putting the right tools around him and putting him in a position to succeed. And for me, that goes back to, I felt like, I know this kind of divided some people in the city here. I felt like Kirby Smart didn't always put him in positions to succeed when he was at UGA.
Absolutely.
And that's not even like the fake punt fiasco in the SEC title game. It's, there were times you got to a point in that season where you just knew if he came on the field, we're running the ball here. Okay, let's put 11 in the box right now.
Yeah, that was that was a waste of a season for him.
Yeah, and he wasn't in a position to succeed. However that unfolded, I wasn't in those rooms for those discussions, so I don't know how all that played out. But you go to a place like Ohio State where they hand you the keys to a Death Star, and they work you into it. And by the end of it, you're doing pretty good work. His worst games statistically, I think one of them was the Illinois game. He won his worst games statistically, and the Bama game last year is just. Because the national championship game, I mean, they just got that game was so physically violent to watch. That what they did to him and the Ohio State team, and then what Ohio State did to guys like Najee Harris, where they just laying the hit stick as hard as they could. Like it was like watching two heavyweights go at it and thinking, okay, no one's getting past the 8th round, so the clip's going to get emptied here before we're done.
So this is like Hagler-Hearns is what you're saying?
Well, Bama had more. I mean, Bama obviously had more in the tank because
or if somebody was playing Mike Tyson Punch-Out, money blow.
Oh yeah, that too.
Money blow.
Yeah, it was just, and then of course putting a linebacker on Devontae Smith on a go route because that works out well always. It's still one of my favorite clips from that game is watching that poor linebacker from Ohio State being asked to cover Devontae Smith on a go route and just watching those arms pump desperately, knowing he's not going to be able to keep up with him because he was put in a position to fail.
Uh-huh.
But
I've seen that play too, and my eyes just got really big. It's like, no, they're not.
No, they're not. And Mac Jones is going to make that throw 100 times out of 100. But to that point of Justin Fields, I think, was put in good positions to succeed in Ohio State. And if Chicago and Matt Nagy put him in good positions, I think that could be a really good landing spot. And God, Chicago could use a quarterback for the first time in
generations.
Whew, man, do we want to say Rex Grossman because they made a Super Bowl?
A Bears QB has made the Pro Bowl once.
Was it McMahon?
Yeah, since the Super Bowl in 1985, since the Super Bowl year of 1985, the Bears have only had a Pro Bowl quarterback one time. It was Mitchell 3 years ago.
Who had to say, I'm not going to the Pro Bowl? How many people had to say that before Mitchell Trubisky got to go to the Pro Bowl?
Uh-huh.
That's a good question.
Right. So before we finish the A block, can we talk about New England for a second?
Okay.
I saw, everybody is sitting there and looking at Mac Jones as the second coming of, hell, I don't know. But for me, and I'll go ahead. I'll go.
Is that what you were getting at?
Sure. I look at Mac Jones, and for me, until further notice, he is A.J. McCarron. I'm going to put that out there.
Maybe.
Oh, my God.
Because of the idea of the system quarterback at the University of Alabama, and I'll say the same thing about system quarterbacks at the University of Florida, when in the Spurrier era. For me, think of all of the quarterbacks at the University of Alabama and the level of success that they have had in the pros during Nick Saban's time there as head coach.
Mm-hmm.
Blake Sims, A.J. McCarron, keep going. Until further notice, for me, Mac Jones is still in that category. And I know that you've signed Cam Newton to another one-year deal. When your skill position players got injured, including Cam, your offense was basically rudderless, and it was easy to peg.
Well, their skill position players were terrible.
Right. And so when you had a bunch of rookies and you had a healthy Cam Newton, it was easy. You forced the skill position players to beat you when they were young and still trying to figure the system out. And so it was difficult for New England to function. Now that you have Cam Newton coming back for one more year, you have Mac Jones that's a part of this equation too. For me, you're looking at two different guys coming at it from two different ways, and it's going to be interesting what Josh McDaniels tries to do with these guys at quarterback. Is it two separate envelopes that they get every single week? But for me, I'm not as sold on Mac Jones as everyone else seems to be on this planet. I'm more sold on Bill Belichick's dog making the draft picks than I am about Mac Jones being one of those draft picks.
And see, I can get behind Mac Jones in New England just because I think he came out of that. He's coming out of that Saban model, even if he doesn't start as much at Alabama. He spent enough time on the bench and he spent enough time under Saban that he can roll in there. And I think he's going to have a general idea of what is expected of him by Belichick. And it might not be complex of, hey, I still got two or three good running backs. I need you to make a couple throws a game. N'Keal Harry is still there. I don't even know if N'Keal Harry has played more than 4 games as a pro, even though I hoped he would be a really good wideout in this game. You've got a couple weapons, but this kind of feels like, hey, we're bringing you in. If you don't succeed year one, it's not a failure. You're not going to get put on the street. But I want to see what I've got with you. And I think if he succeeded in the Saban system, I think he's got the potential to succeed in this system. But then we do get into the question of how much of that is the weapons around you, especially when you had, had the weapons you had at Alabama. But, that's not his fault. He did really well with what he had. Now he's going to be asked to do well with what he has again in a different situation. So we'll see how it goes. But I can get why Belichick did it. Kid spent a lot of time under Saban. It's probably, not completely dissimilar.
Yeah, and look at it this way. Josh McDaniels, who is Belichick's offensive coordinator, when he was the coach of the Denver Broncos, made Tim Tebow look really good, almost like an NFL quarterback good.
It's terrifying.
Yeah. If he can do that, there's a pretty good chance he can take somebody like a Mac Jones and make him at least acceptable in the NFL grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
It's not a big ask. I want to say, I'm trying to look up the list of the Patriots did pick up some guys in free agency this year. They signed Jonnu Smith, a tight end from the Titans.
Hunter Henry, they picked him up too. Matthew Judon.
Nelson Aguilar from Aguilar.
Nelson Aguilar?
Yeah, Nelson Aguilar. Yeah.
So yeah, Nelson Aguilar, who was basically Clifford Franklin from the replacements.
Yes.
Nelson Aguilar can run a 4.3 in his sleep.
Oh my God, that's a great analogy.
Yeah. Today was a good day for Clifford Franklin.
He can run a 4.3 in his sleep, but will he catch it? There remains a great question of whether or not he will catch it.
Ball's like a cold to Nelson Aguilar. Nelson Aguilar only might catch it.
But yes, I mean then as far as the draft goes, they also pick up Christian Barmore from Alabama. Just went Alabama heavy, y'all.
Yeah,
let's see.
Might be a reason for that.
Yeah. Then they went back to shoring up the defense in the middle rounds. Running back from Oklahoma, Stevenson goes out there. This feels kind of like, and it's Belichick. He's going to at least one or two of these guys he picks up in the third or fourth round is going to end up being a Pro Bowler for no good reason other than Bill Belichick saw something about them that he looked at with like 4D chess that we just missed.
Well, and there was a really great insight into their drafting where one of the beat writers, and this was like at the last, I think this was after like the day one draft was completed, and Belichick is having his Zoom press conference at like 12:30 in the morning. And a beat writer had asked him about how they classify all of their drafts and what they do. And he goes into one of the best answers that you will ever hear from Bill Belichick in any press conference setting, because the reporter wasn't there to get the question answered because Belichick doubled back to it. And he literally said, we don't sit there and go, well, he's a 3-star, a 4-star, a 5-star. We don't do that. They have a system that involves color coding and multiple dynamics. And yeah, Jared, it is 4D Vulcan chess, how they look at guys. It's numbers and letters and colors and codes, and they take everything into account where these athletes are concerned. It's not just what they do on the field, but they classify every single thing that they're looking at, and they have different ways of doing it. So it's not just that linear 3-star, 4-star, 5-star approach. It literally is 4D chess.
And one of the things, I don't know if either one of you guys have ever gotten a chance to see this. HBO did something, I want to say a year or two ago, where they talked to both Belichick. They did a thing on the friendship between Bill Belichick and Nick Saban and their shared experiences as coaches and things like that. And one of the things that came out that jumped out at me when I watched it was both of them describing how their approach to football players, which is, when you're on my team, you have a specific job to do. This is your job, your position. This is what that position is expected to do on every play. I don't want you going to go pick up what somebody else is going to do or help out somebody else doing that. Do your job. Don't do their job. Do your job.
Do your job.
If you can do your job and everybody else on the team does exactly what they're supposed to do, everything's going to work.
Mm-hmm. It's basically a Borg approach to football. You're part of a collective.
And it works for them.
Right.
It's a way of going about doing things that you don't see that often, and it also explains some of the success that they've had. If you can get guys to buy into that philosophy, they do what you're responsible for and don't drift from it, and you can stay that disciplined, you can be successful.
And I mean, Jarrett, that's why New England gets guys from all these different schools that we sit there and go, well, why did they get this guy? Well, it's because that guy does that particular task, and that's all they're looking for. It's where you're getting them from. And here's New England's schools from this draft: Alabama, Oklahoma, Michigan, Missouri, Colorado, UCF. So it's where they find a guy that they can get locked into task. It's not just what they've done.
No, it's a matter of finding guys who fit into what they want to do, and he'll continue to do that and find guys who have the right personality, have the right mannerisms. They're going to find guys that they think can come in and can work day one, and I think that's going to work for Mac Jones as well. I'm not going to sit here and say I don't hope he succeeds. I mean, I hope the guy goes in there and does well. I mean, it is one of those things, and this is something that gets me every draft. Is as much as people want to get upset, and to bring it to almost like a wholesome conclusion, as much as people want to get upset about, oh, we don't want that guy or we do want that guy, it never gets old watching a bunch of kids like have their dream realized with all their friends and family around them that basically they're going to get a chance to play a game for a living. And even if, the entire damn arena is booing the draft pick, it's always really cool to see just that realization of those kids.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you don't really know how that kid's going to adjust to moving from a level where he could be dominant at to a level where everybody else is pretty much at that same same bar. Everybody reacts to it differently. And John and I have talked about this at length on various shows. It's always been my one thing about high school and college recruiting. When colleges go and recruit high school kids, you don't know how an 18-year-old's going to adjust to be away from home playing college football for the first time. Same thing with making that step from college to the pros. You just don't know. Guys, why don't we go ahead and wrap up here in the first half of the show? We've kind of droned on a little bit here.
Nothing wrong with droning.
In the second half, we're going to talk about a new coach at Kansas, a topic we've discussed quite a bit here on previous episodes of the review. And we're going to go into some little bit of inside baseball, for lack of a better way to put it. As college athletics enters the free transfer, free agency, whatever you want to call it, not the portal, but a new transfer rule. That and more when we come back to the second half of the review. You are listening to the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
The Online Sports Guys would love to hear from you. Go to our Twitter page at OSG Sports for a comment, rant, or just whatever's on your mind about college football.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Leopold!
Congratulations, you have made it to the second half of the show. As we said going into the break, you are listening to the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. And before we get into the content part of the show, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the social media and marketing part of things.
There you go. Get your promo.
We have an app, a phone app. It's free. You can go to the App Store. You can go to Google Play Store. Look up OSG Sports. It's there. Download it today. It doesn't cost you a thing, just a couple of megabytes of space on your phone. You can find us on social media. We're at OSG Sports on both Facebook and Twitter. Check. One of these days I'll get around to putting us on Instagram. Not quite hip or cool enough to get us on TikTok or any of that other stuff. Plus, I'd have to come up with funny videos, and I'm not really good at that.
And we aren't either.
So we'll stick to what we know, and that's football. Guys, one of the things that we talked about a few episodes back, is the mess at Kansas when let's just say Les Miles and Jeff Long got blown up and blown out of the university.
See, now I'm just gonna lay back and let Jarrett take this one because of his Louisiana-ness here. I've won the toss and I've deferred.
But before we talk about Les, we have to talk about who Kansas hired.
Leopold.
That's Lance Leopold, formerly now And quite honestly, guys, he's been a success everywhere he's been. He hasn't been a big name coach, but he has won with a lot less than what he's going to have at Kansas.
So here's my question for you, Kansas. Let's push aside for a moment, because I'm sure you guys have already rehashed, resurrected, and killed again the Les Miles fiasco that is Les Miles in general. You can gesture towards all of Les Miles and write a book on it, and it's not going to change. It's just a mess. And it's absolutely embarrassing. Here's my question for you, Kansas, and I guess for you, Jeff Long, although I guess I shouldn't be surprised considering your history. You hired that man after he got blown out at LSU. He got blown out 2 years late at LSU. Team rallied around him multiple times to keep him in there. And then it was almost it was almost a miraculous finish in Auburn that keeps his job again, except time doesn't bend the way that Les wanted it to once, and he's done. Kansas, we need to talk about the fact that you're getting retreads here instead of going and getting Kansas, have you ever heard of Neil Brown? Did you ever hear of Justin Fuente back before Justin Fuente set his reputation on fire at Virginia Tech? Have you ever considered, I don't know, a Bronco Mendenhall when he had one of the dirtiest teams anyone's ever seen in the Mountain West? They got in a fight with Memphis, y'all.
Mormons fought Memphis.
That was
it was beautiful.
Pure Sixers too.
Oh my God, that was so beautiful. But why are you going with retreads when you're Kansas and you could be instead of paying a ton of money for a retread who just washed out and who's kind of behind the times here and refused to adjust? Why are you not going and finding a young coach in a group of five who, might take a little bit of time, but he's not going to cost you a fortune? He's not going to cripple your athletic department if you have to buy him out. Why are you making these decisions? And then I look at Jeff Long and I go, oh, yeah, sure. Okay, never mind. We're good. I guess Bobby Petrino wasn't available this time either. I mean, there's fewer.
He's an FCS.
There's fewer turns in Kansas than there are in Arkansas. If you were curvy roads for him to lay his bike down on, how about that? Maybe that should have been the reason. Jesus, Kansas, get it together. Mark Mangino ain't walking through that door. Thank God.
There's a reason they have been the worst program in college football for easily the last decade, ever since the end of Mangino the Hut. And
just that picture of him with the Orange Bowl mascot will seared into my brain forever. Oh God, nothing will ever take that out.
Yeah, I got to go find that now on the interwebs. Just drop it in here on the video version of the show on YouTube.
Yes.
But for all the misfortune and all the bad, disastrous decisions that they have made, I actually like the hire of Leopold. I think it's a good choice.
Well, because first off, he's economically feasible, considering all the money that you've thrown at Les and at Jeff Long and at the athletic department to try. Because remember, you're also talking about renovations to your stadium complex, to your field house, to your weight room, all of these capital improvements that you had in mind that you thought that folks were just going to donate barrels and barrels of money, and every Scrooge McDuck in Kansas was going to come wandering up to the university and sit there at KU and go, we want you to fix this. And here's Les Miles on top of it, when you had David Beatty, who was given virtually no support whatsoever and basically told, see ya, don't want to be ya. And you bring in, everything else that has completely and totally collapsed.
Rare cost-efficient coach that they've had over the last decade.
Yeah, and so now what you've done with all this money that you've invested is you've gotten yourself into a point to where I'd love to see what your deficit spending is now when it comes to the athletic department with everything that you have planned. But when you can so when you bring in Lance Leopold, that has won at Buffalo, he's won in the MAC, and I think that's what Jarrett was talking about before. You bring in coaches from all of these conferences that are Go Fives, that have established themselves as winning those second-tier bowls and been consistent winners, getting your occasional double-digit win season. This for Kansas, for me, I sit here, I applaud. This is me applauding Kansas for picking up Leipold from Buffalo. I want to see what Buffalo does to try to get the next guy in there. Maybe you promote a coordinator or something to try to keep continuity. But I like this hire. This is the one you should have done before you hired Les Miles. You should have brought Leipold in then and not after you've set fire to everything and trying to have Leipold be, the guy to try to fix everything after you've napalmed the football activities in Lawrence, Kansas.
I'm proud of you for figuring it out now, but it shouldn't have taken you this long.
No.
Other teams, other places are going and doing really smart things on a budget. And get it, Kansas. I mean, this isn't 2007. I mean, I don't know, Kansas, who needs to hear this. If you need to hear this, but you're not a top tier program. And this isn't basketball where Bill Self could probably burn down someone's crops and keep his job. This isn't basketball, and this isn't 2007, man. You got to be realistic about who you are and what you are. And I feel like, okay, cool. Now you're doing it, and you're being smart about it. Like, this might take some time. It might be 2 or 3 years before we see this pay off. But I mean, it could pay off with, hey, man, they rolled out a 5-6 win season. You could become that sort of Iowa State-esque program who it took a while once we got our coach, but now we occasionally take a couple scalps off the big boys and we make a bowl game.
Yep.
I mean, you look at, and now when you bring in someone like Leipold to be your coach, all of those pipelines that he's established for bringing in some of the best talent, especially with the running game that he had at the University of Buffalo, where you had a record-setting running back in Division I, all of those pipelines that you had for recruiting, you're now bringing with you to Kansas. And yeah, I know that you want to go into the Kansas City area and the St. Louis area, and you want to try to keep things local, but at the same time, you've expanded your reach a little bit with a coach who's successful. Does that open the Northeast to you a little bit? Do you get to bring in those do you bring in those factories that are masquerading as offensive linemen that can be those people movers to get that running game going? I think it's an interesting situation here for KU, bringing in what you've got from UB. I think that there's some promise here, but the key is you've got to be patient about it.
Time for the transition here because got to move things along as a producer.
Yes.
Along that line, the NCAA this past week approved a measure that will allow players a one-time transfer between schools with no penalty. This is something that was in place for most sports, but you couldn't do it in football and you couldn't do it in basketball, the two money makers. Good move, bad move, or indifferent, because really this is essentially freeing up the transfer, in a lot of ways, freeing up the transfer portal.
Jarrett, take it.
I mean, at the rate like big name guys were getting that free transfer because they were filing a hardship extension, at the rate that was happening anyway, just kind of felt like a conclusion that we were just going to get to anyway for every guy who isn't a Justin Fields, who can put in a transfer, and not to make light of Fields' transfer out of UGA. I don't mean to do that, but yeah, okay, cool. Now everybody, now you get that one transfer, and I do like it, especially in situations where, hey, that guy recruited me for the last 3 years. I showed up and he jumped ship, and now I'm in a system that doesn't fit what I want to do.
There you go.
Yeah, and it's
logic. Oh my God.
We don't punish coaches for changing their minds. They don't punish kids for changing their minds. Hell, what's going to happen right now over with Eric Gilbert? Don't even know what's going to happen with him. Like, the dude withdrew from LSU, went to the transfer portal, was supposed to go to Florida. That didn't happen. Was supposed to go to UGA. That didn't happen. Last I heard, he was seen back in Baton Rouge. No clue what's going to happen. What happens if you enter the transfer portal and come out where you started? Do we break time and space with college football?
I think so. It's like Marvin Barnes getting on the plane from Louisville to St. Louis, and he looks at his ticket and he realizes that the arrival time in St. Louis is 10 minutes earlier than the time he gets on the plane. He says, "I ain't getting on no time machine." That's what you got here. I mean, literally.
That is old school reference there, dude.
That's your Google search for the day, kid. You want to talk about breaking the time-space continuum? Yeah, you've circled back. It's a Beatles reference. Get back to where you once belonged. But I don't know if that's the healthiest thing for Eric Gilbert. But I understand circling back to where things were. But for me, you're just kind of like, I don't know. But yeah, it's for me, honestly, about time. You're adding logic to the situation, and you're going, you should have been thinking like this a long time before when you're looking at the whole transfer situation. And I know that, what did we say, 3 or 4 other conferences had already decided, much like the Mountain West had done this past week, where they were going to sit there and it was what the ACC, the AC, and the MAC, I think, were the ones that had already said we're just going to go by NCAA guidelines instead of the guidelines that we had set ourselves. Frankly, it's about time, and I'm glad that this is the way that it is.
And it basically gives them a timetable. They have to, if you want to leave your school, your current school, and go to another school, you have to make that announcement by May 1st. It also avoids, hopefully, the Tate Martell factor where you start portaling to different places as well.
Jesus.
Oh, there's an all-star portaler right there.
Right up there with Gunnar Kiel.
Wow.
Between them, they must have had 7.
Yeah, I think 7. I think you're right.
5 different jumps.
Yeah.
Something like
that. I think it's something that, like John said, is a long time coming. The NCAA has, for years, college football coaches have complained that it's going to deplete their rosters. It's going to not give them any flexibility with their rosters, which isn't necessarily true. It's just something that's going to make them think a little bit more about it, because you got, and I'm reading from an ESPN article here where Sam Pittman at Arkansas was talking about how he left a couple of scholarships available for guys who may end up coming his way via the transfer portal or from the transfer rule, because the day we record this is May 2nd. That could all come into play here.
Mm-hmm. Always make sure you got some wiggle room.
Yeah. In years past, you had some of the mega schools like Alabama, and a few others who would stack their plates so full of recruits and scholarship athletes that they had to put guys on gray shirts.
Yeah, which was another.
I remember when that hit the mainstream, less than a decade ago, when people really outside of college football circles got an idea what gray shirting was, and it really hit hard. And they went, "Wait, they're doing what?"
Mm-hmm.
Which is basically a way to game the system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this should, in theory, I think, eliminate that.
Oh, there'll be some gaming. It'll be gamey. Folks will find a way. Trust me, they'll just find out different ways to do it.
Yeah, it is kind of what they do, particularly in college football, finding ways around the rules. And speaking of rules, one other rule that we want to talk about is name, image, and likeness. And the reason I bring this up is because I think it was probably, John, a year or so ago, where we talked about how Florida was going to be the first state, or either Florida or California that was going to be the first state to enact a rule requiring college athletes to be compensated for use of their name, image, and likeness.
Yeah, until
the legislators got more deeply involved. Now comes the example of Florida, who stood to put the rule in play this July. And during their legislative session this year, they had some second thoughts, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it.
And then they had second thoughts on their second thoughts because everybody got mad.
They delayed it for a year, only to piss off pretty much everybody and anybody who wasn't a state legislator, and reconsidered it. But if you look closely at what Florida passed, there's some interesting things in there, some of which include the ability for Florida schools to jump out of the NCAA if the NCAA doesn't agree to allow players to make that money. Are we opening a Pandora's box here, or is it just Florida being Florida and doing Florida things?
Jared, I'm just going to say that it's the latter because it's Florida.
I think it's Florida doing Florida things, but I don't think it's just Florida doing Florida things at the same time. It's really easy to look at it. This is, oh man, Florida's doing stuff again, but they're not. I don't think they'd be the first or the last to try and to kind of squeak these things through. And this happens when you have like 70 pages of legislation that is written all sorts of weird ways because there are standards of how you have to write legislation, and it's just weird. And it's one of the things where I'm like, why are you making this decision? Because either way, you're gonna catch hell for it. There's no good PR ending here. Mm-mm. So, good job, Florida. You try to Florida. I'm sure you'll try again another day.
Yeah, I mean, there are a handful of states, not just Florida, who have proposed legislation to do similar but not necessarily the same type of things over the course of the next year. It'll be interesting to see how much or how many of them actually follow through and make it happen. One last thing here before we wrap up here on the review, and that's actual college football action, guys. We've got college football games going on. The FCS quarterfinals are this.
That is true.
It's still kind of hard to grasp the idea that we're talking about college football games being played as we cross into May, but yet we are.
I like it.
Yeah, I mean it is fun having something this late in the year and like a weird time. I don't think it's something necessarily that sticks. No. At least right now, I don't think. I'll be very interested to see like what kind of inevitability do we reach? Do we end up with JMU and North Dakota State in a championship game again? Like
pretty well. I mean, right here's your final 8.
I'm pulling up the bracket.
That's my name. North Dakota, Sam Houston, North Dakota State and Sam Houston, North Dakota, James Madison, Delaware, Jacksonville State, who got in a full season, by the way. They're 10-2. And then Southern Illinois and the Jackrabbits of South Dakota State. So it's a lot of the same folks that have persevered in this spring season as well.
You see, I lost a lot of it after I watched Kennesaw State absolutely, face plant for the second year in a row.
Yes,
against Monmouth with a chance to make the playoff and win the Big South and just absolutely embarrass themselves for a second straight year in the most important game of the season. Long live the triple option, though.
Indeed. As a Georgia Southern graduate, I second that motion. Yeah, it's interesting. The same Houston State and North Dakota State are playing right now as we record this show. And ESPN, the various networks have all 4 of the quarterfinal games on TV.
Love it. Hey, it's content and it's football. And it takes up 3.5-hour blocks. So, I mean, honestly, that's what you're looking for if you're the 4-letter. If you have the chance to sit there and take a block of time and treat it as like a bowl game, which is what this is. This is what you were supposed to have back in December anyway. And so now it just got transferred to May book. I mean, it's a ratings opportunity for college football.
How angry is South Dakota State going to be when they get to the final and there's North Dakota State waiting and they have to play them for a third time?
God,
because there's a really good chance that's going to happen.
I mean, if North Dakota State wins today, then they'll probably get JMU in the semifinal. And Jesus, now South Dakota State might actually cross the border and burn that place down.
Hey, long live Dakota Marker. That's all I have to say.
Last question to you two before we wrap things up here. Happy spring games are a thing of the past now for most of the 1AA or the 1AA, the football bowl subdivision teams. We move closer toward a regular season with a full fans. Are you guys excited about this coming season? Full houses again in college football.
Oh yeah.
I
think it's going to be good, Jarrett, to get back to normal.
No, I agree with you, and that's exactly where I'm going. It's like the concept of normal here feels very good. And the concept of a full schedule again with some fun out of conference games. I mean, I don't like watching, LSU have to play, Northwestern State. That just kills my Saturday because I don't really care. They're going to drop 40-point victory on them anyway. But give me the fun out of conference games that always give us intriguing weirdness. Give me those. And give me my Pac-12 after dark.
Mullets and Mormons, baby. Mullets and Mormons.
In Charlotte, North Carolina, Clemson versus Georgia. That's going to be a hell of a game and something to look forward to. Guys, Time to wrap things up here on the review. For those of you watching at home, thank you for watching on our YouTube channel at OSG Sports. For those of you listening on Spreaker, we appreciate you finding us on the podcasting network of choice. And if you're listening on the app, thank you so much for downloading it. We are forever grateful. For OSG Nelson, for Jarrett Smith, I am OSG Phil. We are part of the OSG Sports team. Thank you for tuning in. Everybody have a great week. We'll be back again in a couple weeks with a new episode of The Review. Be good, everybody. Bye.